everybody. Welcome to the last episode of 2017 for Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, and back with the quaff. You're looking good, man.
Hey, man.
Julio Vela.
I'm looking to just do like a just for gray here and just do
Really?
wingtips.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm
That's gonna be
saying?
your new thing?
And then
Try to add some experience through that.
talk like these. That's my Godfather.
Well, we're gonna. Good. I'm looking forward to it. We're gonna have a great show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. It's gonna be real exciting for the next hour. We are gonna talk all about this Trump special counsel investigation, which I know y'all have been following. Everybody's been following it. But you know what we're gonna do different tonight than everybody else? We're not gonna be a bunch of talking head pundits that you see on CNN giving misinformation to people. We've actually got real lawyers here who actually go into federal court and represent real people in federal court on white-collar cases. And I'm going to bring in the people who are going to do it. Straight from Moscow, Robb Fickman. You have landed here on our fine shores. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Jimmy.
You lost the accent. I thought you were
I'll bring it back, later
at some
in the
point.
show. Yeah, I'll just throw it in.
Okay.
If you wanted me to, I'm sorry I messed you up there.
That's all right. I thought you were just going to keep rolling with it.
I was once going to do a voir dire in an accent, and the judge agreed to it. And then she realized I probably would actually do that, so I did.
So she entered an order precluding you from.
And she just didn't think it'd be a good idea for me to use an accent. Or it was going to be a Russian accent too. I'll bring it up later.
Okay.
I got to warm up.
That's right.
If he dies, he dies. that's the Soviet. You know, talking to Sylvester Stallone.
Ivan Drago. Yeah.
Yeah. Which one was that?
Four.
Oh. Yeah.
See, you're a big fan. You know the numbers.
That's right. Also joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, a partner at Smyser, Kaplan, and Veselka, David Isaak. David.
Hi, Jimmy.
Good to have you on the show finally.
I'm glad to be on the show.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time tonight. Gosh, where to begin, guys? Why don't we just begin at the very beginning of the charges? Because I think that's a good place to start. Let's just kind of take it in chronological order. Of course, we get the special counsel investigation.
You don't even want to start with the crimes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
you want to start with the birth of Trump?
you go
Original
from the real
sin,
beginning. I wore my orange tie in honor of him. So
well, it's not red. He only wears that red one.
The red shade.
Yeah.
No, but the first charges that come out, guys, are the Manafort and Gates indictment. And we then learn we have another plea that comes out very early on, and Papadopoulos, the staff advisor. And it's very interesting because you read through all this and it becomes clear that Papadopoulos was probably wearing a wire at some point.
Yeah,
right.
But I want to focus on the Manafort case for a little bit here and start with that, because they are alleging somewhere around $70 million, $75 million in potentially ill-gotten proceeds.
Right.
They tried to have an agreement for bond, and they got there. There was an $11 million bond package. The Justice Department said, whoa, we want time to look at all of this. And then just last week, they filed a response saying, no, we're not going to agree to this, because it turns out, Mr. Manafort, it appears that you've been ghostwriting op-eds in this whole thing.
And that happens all the time.
Well, this is just the strangest thing. Yeah.
I mean, just to get the ball rolling here.
Yeah.
I think that the people that are the focus of the investigation are unique in that they are very powerful people. They're used to living in their own world, basically. They're used to doing what they want without close scrutiny. Mr. Manafort travels all around the world, has business interests all around the world, apparently represents lots of different countries without bothering to let people know that with the United States government. Mr. Flynn, the same. It sounds like the President of the United States, probably a similar situation. And so we have a unique group of people that are under investigation. And I think that's why we have this bizarre situation where a guy's on bond in a federal charge, a very serious one, who's attempting to ghostwrite an article that's in his own favor. And I mean, who does that? None of us have ever had a client do that.
Well, and it's an interesting condition of bond, too, that they put on there, because clearly they requested that there's as I understand it, and I haven't gotten to pull the bond conditions yet, but there is something in there about not basically affecting the publicity on this case.
Right. Well, remember his lawyer came out.
Yeah.
And his
And
lawyer
it wasn't a gag
gave-
order. There's
Yeah.
not a gag order.
Well, his lawyer came out. I think there is now.
Maybe after this. But
Well, remember his lawyer came out and gave a real interesting statement. After Manafort appeared, his lawyer came out and made a big speech that was a lot about Trump.
Yeah.
And how this is, not involve Trump and Trump's the greatest guy. And it was almost like a pitch for wink, wink, nod, nod. We're still waiting on that pardon.
On that pardon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to dump on you. He didn't cooperate.
Well, but the interesting, David, you and I were talking about the other day about this op-ed piece, is that clearly the special prosecutors are leaking all of these documents. That's the only way that these things, is particularly the fact that Deutsche Bank records have been subpoenaed. That stuff can only be coming from the special counsel.
I don't know where else that'd be coming from. It's not coming from the bank.
No, they don't want that out.
Yeah, and it's certainly not going to come from, you never say never with this case, but it's not coming from Trump or his people. So where's that coming from?
Well, remember, Trump's lawyers were having a meeting at a restaurant and cavalierly casually discussing the case, and there's a reporter at the next table.
Right. But apparently that was well known to have happened and might have been intentional.
Right.
Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
But like what you're saying as far as leaks.
Yeah.
Well, if that was purposeful, then that was a purposeful Trump team leak.
Sure.
So I think there's a lot of shenanigans going on here. The one player that I don't think is engaged in shenanigans is the special counsel. I don't think Mueller is a shenanigan kind of guy. I think he's a real dead serious kind of guy, and I think that probably scares the living out of Trump if he's capable of having conscious thoughts about things like that.
Well, so here's the interesting thing. It's kind of making for strange bedfellows, so to speak, because, if any of you follow Fickman's Twitter or Facebook, I think you know where he stands on this issue.
I stand with Russian government, which stands with our good friend Donald Trump. Let me tell you, Donald Trump is the best friend Russia ever had. And he's good for America, but mostly good for Russia. He's a great premier and deputy premier for Putin.
So somebody must be
Now you
ghostwriting.
happy with the accent?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
based
that's
on that, somebody must be ghostwriting your Facebook page.
Yeah.
But it has made
God bless the atheist. God bless.
Right.
President Trump,
But most of
deputy premier.
the criminal defense bar is anti-Trump.
Yeah, but we have Republicans and
do.
Democrats in the
Right,
defense
right.
bar.
But I'd say that the majority of the criminal defense bar tends to be more, and I don't know if but I think there's even a lot in the Republican Party who are anti-Trump that feel that way. And so this is kind of made for an interesting deal because, rather than let the investigation play out, so to speak, and kind of we all know how this may go or anticipate where the next move on the chessboard may be, a lot of people are just kind of like ready to get it over with and move on down the road and start the impeachment proceedings.
Oh, I think partly it's because of this, that, if we're honest, we have a president that has shown a proclivity toward being a pathological liar and about anything and everything. He's disregarded long-standing traditions. He's making friends with our enemies. He is disrespectful to our allies. He disrespects a POW, disrespects a disabled person. The list goes on. And those of us that are part of the criminal justice system, those of us that practice law for a living, we may be sort of liberal on the one hand. On the other hand, we're all pretty conservative because we sort of believe in the system of law. We believe that we are a nation of laws and not men, which means that there's no man above the law.
Right.
Trump seems to act like he believes he's above the law. His lawyers recently said that he was above the law and that he could not obstruct justice.
Well, that's
an
an interesting question, though, because I mean, Trump is the leader of the executive branch, whether we like it or not.
We don't.
And we don't. But he is. And as the chief executive, he's the nation's chief law enforcer. He gets to direct how enforcement priorities are set. And, I think were this any other investigation, he could say, I don't think we ought to be investigating this set of issues. We ought to be over here. I mean, he's the one who appoints Jeff Sessions. Under the Constitution, it all flows back to him. And so what his defenders are saying, and just to play devil's advocate a bit here,
I understand.
what his defenders are saying is, look, if he wants to put a stop to this investigation, or if he doesn't want Comey to charge Flynn, he has every right to do that. Now, I mean, I think the problem is that you've also, it's an investigation that involves him. So in doing that, it's not just furthering a public interest, which would, I think, how we would assume a president would act when directing law enforcement or setting law enforcement priorities, but it's also it's to his own benefit, and I think that's what makes it uncomfortable, and I think that's possibly what could, if there was an argument for that being obstruction, what could make it obstruction.
Well, there's a very strong argument for it, and I'd add that there's we do know from history that governments that use law enforcement at their beck and call are typically abusive governments, and that while he may have authority in that area, there's no historical precedent in a democratic government for a president or elected leader to direct law enforcement on what they can do or can't do in terms of criminal investigations. I mean, we have laws, the laws are passed, and the law enforcement is supposed to be independent and act independent. It would be quite bizarre if we had a president who was actively engaged in directing the attorney general on which cases to prosecute and whatnot. They can set broad policies, and they do. Obama set broad policies. But for him to get specifically involved and say, don't prosecute this man who hypothetically committed this crime because he happens to be my pal and also was working at my behest, and that might lead to me, Mr. Flynn, that would be. I mean, that's just beyond the realm, and that's why we're having this investigation, and that's why it's not going to stop.
Yeah, and
I mean, I think there actually is some precedent for a president interfering with an investigation, and it's the, I was 2 years old when this happened, but it was the Saturday Night Massacre. I mean, it was
right, and look what happened.
And look what happened as a result.
Right, the Saturday Night Massacre was, and I was a little older than 2, but what did he do? He ordered the Attorney General to fire the special counsel. The Attorney General was a very honorable man. He refused, so he fired the Attorney General. We're talking about Nixon and Elliot Richardson. He then fired the Deputy Attorney General because he refused. And then Bork, who is number 3 in line, agreed to do it because he's a soulless bastard. He agreed to do it, and he fired Cox. And there was such an uproar and that was a special counsel, such an outrage at the time that they ended up with another guy as the special counsel, a guy named Leon Jaworski, and who had been a prosecutor at Nuremberg. And he was not somebody to be taken lightly. I would say Mr. Mueller and Mr. Jaworski have a lot in common. Mr.
Right.
Mueller is a combat veteran from Vietnam, and these are not wimpy dudes. Mr. Mr. Jaworski came on board, and there was no more Nixon nonsense after that. And so, yeah, I agree. I mean, it could happen here. Mueller could get fired, and we could play that out if you want, Jimmy. I mean, you know what's going to happen if he gets fired.
and we can go that route in a little bit. I mean, I've seen your, and it's not just your belief that potentially he could be brought on by either the New York State Attorney General or some other Attorney General's office to continue an investigation, but that would be of state charges. I don't believe they would have jurisdiction to investigate Russian collusion or possible that it would be state crimes.
Right, and there are a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of lapse. We are a lot of cases that can be filed and are filed in state court, and then the feds pick them up because they get excited about it. So there's lots of crimes that can be filed in either federal or state court. And my understanding is that Mr. Mueller is a number of chess moves ahead of anybody on the Trump team, and that knowing that he can be fired, that long ago he began communicating with the Attorney General of the state of New York, because that's where they suspect most of the criminal activity occurred based on whatever evidence they have, and we don't know what it is. And that there's been a communication, an open line of communication between them. And it's probably good for the audience to know Mr. Trump's power and authority in terms of Mueller. He can fire him by ordering the Attorney General to fire him, like the Saturday Night Massacre. That can occur, and Mr. Mueller could be fired. The other thing that Mr. Trump can do, President Trump, I hate calling him that, but okay. The other thing that President Trump can do is he can grant pardons to everybody on federal crimes. So if Mr. Mueller prosecutes everybody, he gets them all convicted, Trump can wait till all that happens and go, "You're pardoned. You're pardoned. You're pardoned." Sprinkle some water on you. You're pardoned, and he can do that. He has complete authority to do it. But what he can't do is, and you know this, I'm just talking to the audience, is that Trump's ability to grant pardons only goes to federal crimes. It doesn't go to state crimes, and his ability to fire a prosecutor only goes to federal prosecutors. So what I've read is that there's been an alignment between the state's attorney general's office in New York, who parenthetically is a Democrat, and they have been in communication because there's both state and federal crimes that they're investigating against the various people that are subjects of this investigation, and that if in fact Trump were to fire Mueller, there's absolutely nothing in his team. There's nothing that would preclude the Attorney General from the state of New York from turning around and going, "Okay, I now hire you to work for the state of New York, and instead of pursuing federal charges, you guys now have an opportunity to be charged in state court and go to state prison and see how you like them apples. See if you like going to Sing Sing and the places like that in the state of New York, and see if you like Rikers Island, Mr. Kushner and Don Jr. You'll have a great time in Rikers Island getting to know the fellas."
But could they pursue Trump though? I don't think that
I think it's a whole different area.
That's a whole different question.
You've got constitutional questions there about whether, again, you come back to whether or not a sitting president can be indicted.
Yeah, it's never happened.
It's never happened. And
I don't think it would happen here.
I don't think it would either.
I think that would be a bridge a little too far.
Well, and I think if a Democratic state attorney general tried to indict a Republican president,
no, I don't think it's going to happen.
I think you'd have some real problems.
Here's what I think will happen, though, is since you asked me.
That's why you're here. You're here to give your thoughts.
Sorry, David. I'll be quiet in 10 minutes and not speak again, because I said all I have is King.
Julio's got to jump into
I know that's not true.
I'm listening, man. I'm just listening.
Sorry. Well, here's what I think will happen regarding Trump, because this is an interesting question, and I don't think that they would try to indict Trump. They may have plenty of evidence, but what they could do, whether it's in federal court or state court, and let's play it out in federal court, because that's where we're still at, is they come back with a conspiracy charge based on all that they get from Flynn and they corroborating evidence, and there's going to be a lot, I think.
We'll get into that next.
And I think there's going to be a whole world that we don't even know about. I don't think there's all kinds of stuff out there, and I think there's going to be a conspiracy charge that's going to include a number of different individuals. And the way that Trump can be involved in that without being indicted is he can be named, as you know, and you guys know, he can be named in the indictment but not indicted.
Or as the generic unindicted
co-conspirator. I mean, the President of the United States, unindicted co-conspirator, Donald Trump Sr., Donald John Trump. I mean, he's a named co-conspirator but not indicted, and then the world gets to know what the investigation believes occurred, and that would give ammunition, if you will, to the Congress and the Senate and the American people to make a decision about, well, what do we do about Mr. Trump? And I think that's the way they're going to come out, if he's involved. I mean, we're presuming that there's evidence that's going to be there, but I don't think this is a foolish presumption. I think that we've I mean, we've been hearing stories for a year about criminal activity and the stories and the people contradicting themselves.
Well, and you've heard a lot of misinformation out there online about secret indictments and all this stuff that were there. They were never there. Clearly never there.
Right.
They were never there. Because
But also,
you had
we
to get a
see
special
Mueller's
counsel
operating on his
appointed.
own line.
He is.
Right.
Well,
And this is not just.
well, and I want
there's real things happening here. People are
Absolutely.
being indicted.
No, and I want to get back to that because, you know, what I want.
Okay, I'm not going to talk anymore.
No. You still have to talk.
You're good. You're good.
What I want.
Hurt my feelings.
What I want the audience to understand is how these cases are built, and you've done a good job setting the base for that. And you know, we've already had one person plead guilty, Papadopoulos, clearly wearing a wire, agreeing to cooperate. But he was kind of a minor player in the whole thing. And Flynn has pled. That's the one that really gets me, though. I was not surprised by Papadopoulos, the deal he got and how it was structured, because he was really such a low man on the totem pole. And for anybody out there, a lawyer who knows, for all of you sitting at the table, the way they build these cases is from the bottom up. Whether it's a 1,000-kilo cocaine case down in the valley, whether it's a white-collar case, whatever the case may be, the way the feds operate is they believe they have a charge, they allege a factual basis, they indict multiple people, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 20 people in a singular indictment. Mm-hmm. And they work their way up, and they try to get the guys on the bottom to flip on the ones on the top.
Right.
And so when they did that with Papadopoulos, not a big shock. Right. Then they came to Flynn. And you could tell he was cutting a deal from the very beginning. And then we heard about him making the withdrawal from the Joint Defense Agreement, which was assigned to everybody with a bar card who's ever done anything like that. Oh, he's about to turn.
It's coming.
Sure.
And sure enough, within 48 hours or whatever, we get, you know, this nice little plea deal that was filed. And
I know why you're shocked, too.
I am stunned because this is a defense lawyer's dream, a cross-examination dream, because the deal that Mike Flynn got is just unbelievable. First of all, you know, there's been all this published about what Flynn did. Yeah. He's made millions of dollars.
Different things. Right.
He didn't report income from Turkey. He may have made.
They were conspiring to kidnap a guy.
Right. Now it comes out he may have been these text messages about they're going to kill the Russian sanctions, and then he might have been funneling money to business associates in Russia.
Right, he's going to make a fortune.
So he made millions, potentially made, or could have made more millions on this thing. And what do they charge him with? They charge him with making a false statement to an FBI agent. A violation
the smallest
of
thing.
With a 5-year cap.
5-year cap. But it gets even better than that, because in the plea agreement, I mean, and this is not your normal plea agreement, ladies and gentlemen. It is not your normal investigation at all. It's not, but they give him, I mean, they set forth what his estimated guideline levels are. I mean, I've only seen that maybe a handful of times.
I've had it recently, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it happens.
And it helps.
It happens. But have you ever had them agree to a 6?
No. But it's an insurance.
Have you ever had them agree that you get 2 points off from this?
Especially on the facts you just
and what you're saying to the audience is this guy got this great. Well, you say it. What you're saying.
Well, so he's, under the sentencing guidelines, the United States sentencing guidelines, which has all these different factors about loss amount, how much money you gained from the fraud, whether you were a leader or organizer. And
everybody gets hosed.
Everybody gets hosed, and everybody gets just
except for Flynn.
Except for Flynn, because he gets this.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think he's singing like a canary.
Of course.
Okay? But this also undercuts it because he gets a base level of 6. He gets 2 levels off. So basically, they've agreed that his sentencing guideline range is 0 to 6 months. Plus, he gets the opportunity to cooperate and get down off that. How do you come down off the lowest range in the guidelines?
I think it's unusual too, but here's my thought on why they did it. Because I know what you're saying. I mean, we cross-examine snitches. We love to cross-examine snitches, and this guy would be fun to cross-examine. All about all the benefits he got.
The millions of dollars. They're not even forfeiting anything.
I think that's a key.
The big one is the forfeiture.
That's the biggest point, is that he gets to keep all his money. Now, how many times have you ever had a case involving, financial wrongdoing, fraud, money laundering, or whatever, and the defendant gets to keep his money?
Never.
I've never had that happen.
A lot of times, as long as, when the government doesn't know about the money.
Right.
Oftentimes they try to go after, separate assets of the wife and try and claim that it was community property.
Exactly. And so the fact that they're not even touching his money to me is incredible. And they're also, another hammer is they're not prosecuting his son.
No.
Who's also got a fair amount of exposure here too.
The threat of prosecuting his son was one of the incentives that got him to come to the table. But I think
along with everything else.
Yeah. But I think the reason they gave him this sweet deal was because he is he's the John Dean of this case. In other words, he's the inside man who is going to be able to paint a roadmap of everything that was going on during the campaign once he got involved, and for the first however many days he was National Security Council of this nation, and it was 20 some odd days. I mean, he's in on everything, and his information, I think they view as extremely valuable. Not just that and look, they're not going to just have a trial and put him on. They're going to have a trial if we have a trial, and they're going to put him on, and they're going to have all kinds of things that corroborate that, because they're going to be going after other people, but they know that there's two people that probably won't flip, and that's the son and that's the son-in-law. They will not flip against Trump. So there's going to be other players. There's a White House full of players, if you think about it, right? There's a White House full of other people that they've been talking to, and they're going to be squeezing all those people by the you-know-what.
McFarlane and Hope Hicks.
All those people. You think Hope Hicks wants to go spend 40 years in prison? I don't think so. I mean, she's 27, 28 years old, former model. I mean,
But the question is, are they going to get the same sweetheart deal, or have, have some of these people been approached and turned it down? And so, I mean...
look at Manafort. Manafort is sort of hanging out there, and I think Manafort has more charges.
Begging for immunity.
Yeah, he has more charges coming. And the thing that we're not talking about here is that as far as Flynn goes, while he got this great deal, there's this huge, giant hammer over his head of all these other charges.
Yeah.
If he's not 100% honest in the view of the government, which is a whole different area,
I think that brings up a really good point.
It is, but this huge hammer is over his head. And they investigated Flynn. They spent apparently a lot of time investigating Flynn before they charged him. So they have all kinds of dirt on him. And we know that when a client debriefs, they have lots of test questions that they ask him to see if they're being truthful. My belief is that Flynn debriefed, and he passed all the test questions on all the dirt they had on him, and he told the truth on all that dirt. And that's why I got this deal, because they have all this. And this leads him to, he's the centerpiece of the next phase of this investigation, which is inside the White House. I mean, we were kind of on the periphery. I mean, Manafort was not there that long. He was in the campaign, right? And then gone. So we're really, when we're talking about as President of the United States, what was going on, and ultimately, what do they want to know? What do they want to know? What do they want to know? They want to know, what did the president know? And when did he know it? The same questions that we had on Richard Nixon.
You had to say that.
Well, and
that's what they want to know.
Well, and that's the question on every fraud case. I mean, every white-collar case is, what did he know and when did he know it? I mean, David, you guys represented Andrew Fastow. And
I got involved in the very tail end of that.
Right, but I mean, your former partner was his lead lawyer, and he didn't even get this good of a deal, and he gave up the goods on, at that time, the largest bankruptcy and fraud case of a Fortune 500 company in America, Enron.
I mean,
that's 6.
I thought it was 10.
Well, he got a 10-year deal.
His deal was for 10, and then the judge, in part because of his extraordinary cooperation, gave him a 6-year deal.
And but the lead defendant in that case, and that wasn't the President of the United States, and there were not questions of collusion with a country that has 1,500 to 1,800 nuclear weapons pointed in our direction.
Well, but you would have thought it was, by the way, the Enron task force, who, by the way, Andrew Weissman on. It's on the same
I know. I heard all about it from Dan. But as Dan said, they deserve each other, right?
Yes.
That the Enron prosecutor who's on this case is just perfect match for
Right.
Trump, and when it comes
Yeah,
to
anytime that
ethics.
Cogdell can come out and support Weissman, that's when
Yeah.
you know the world has been flipped on its head.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about it.
Yeah, but it does, that's the thing. I mean, it's so, they're willing to give deals in a case like this that they would not normally give in
I
other
think it's
cases.
because what's at stake.
I
What's
think
at
that's
stake
right.
is we're talking about the President of the United States and whether or not the President of the United States colluded, and I know that's not per se a crime itself, but there's a million crimes that
another
surround
issue.
that. Whether or not the President of the United States colluded with our enemy, Russia, who I said a minute ago has 15 to 1,800 nuclear weapons. I mean, that is not a question that has ever been asked before in the history of our nation.
No, I agree, but
should Flynn did he get a too good a deal? Probably, in my opinion.
But nobody even gets a deal like drug mules.
Well,
the low-level mules who deliver a dime bag for a high-level conspiracy of importing and
You're talking about
distributing-
equatable justice,
but
but there's
here-
nothing that you can equate to this.
Here's
is
the
nothing.
deal. I think he's getting the deal because every investigation needs that key insider.
This is the guy.
And to pick up on what you said, I think this is the guy. And
Agreed.
It is true that the more valuable your cooperation, the better deal you get.
But that's how perverse the system is.
No,
Because
I'm not saying that's
if Flynn
the way it
was a
ought to
guy-
be, but
if
that's the way it
Flynn was a
is.
guy who delivered a baggie of cocaine, and Trump was the guy importing the kilos, and Flynn didn't know anything, like most of our clients on drug cases that we take on an appointed basis or whatever in federal court, and they're like, I don't really know anything. I was so far down the totem pole, I don't know anything. Well, guess what? You're still going to get 15 years in prison. And in some cases, you might get a mandatory minimum of 10 because you don't have anybody to cooperate against.
The perverse thing is that you're exactly right. The perversion is part of our system now.
Yeah.
and that
It
is
is.
the more criminal activity you're involved in.
That's
the
right.
better deal you
The better deal you get.
Because you have the
you
more
were
to cooperate
involved in
with.
all the crime.
Right.
And
Right.
so Flynn is getting this kiss on the cheek because he apparently was involved in all kinds of criminal activity that he's going to be able to inform credibly, one would presume,
You would presume.
Mueller on. And I think what's critical for us as a nation is that whoever heads up this investigation has to be somebody that is credible and someone that has the Leon Jaworski sort of credibility. And I think this man does. When he first was appointed, there were people on both sides who came out, and I say both sides, I meant the Republicans and Democrats, not Americans versus fascists, which it now is, different issue. Not necessarily. The labeling. But Mr. Mueller is a distinguished person who got good reviews by both sides and is held in high regard. And it's in this day and age, I mean, as we look around, and we were talking about before the show started about some of the politicians that are coming on board maybe soon, like the good guy from Alabama.
Right. Your close personal friend.
Yeah, my good friend. I used to, we used to double date.
Yeah.
Down at the mall.
That's probably a confession. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Making the judges excited here now. The judges are getting. Ooh, we can get him on this. No, I mean the perversion in our system. I agree with you, Jimmy. Is that the more criminal activity you're involved with, the more value. But remember, think of The Godfather. Who was it that turned on him? Jimmy the Bull, right?
Well,
and Jimmy the Bull, I mean, he was going to get whacked. His life was at stake. Well, and think about it just for just a minute, and it maybe sound a little far-fetched, granted.
Right.
But this is a case that involves an investigation that touches on Putin.
Yeah. And
There's been a lot of people, and this is not made up, but there's been a lot of people that have turned on Putin who've ended up dead. A lot of accidental deaths. And personally, I don't believe in coincidence, okay? When people talk about Putin and then they end up dead shortly thereafter because they fell off their balcony.
Or they were poisoned with
Yeah,
some
they
unknown
were
substance.
poisoned with, it's like, it's just a big coincidence. Look, let me explain. In Russia, lots of coincidences. If you talk about Putin, you're going to have a coincidence, okay? That's what we
Just
call
drank
it.
some really bad vodka.
Yeah, something bad is going to happen to you, but it's big coinkydinky. But so here, what do we got? I mean, maybe we don't know. We don't know if Flynn's life has been threatened. We don't know. There's a whole. That's what I was saying earlier. There's an entire universe of information out there that we don't know what it is. And this is the guy that's going to help tie the dots. They've got all these different things they've been investigating.
Yeah, I think that's.
Don't you think he will?
That's
I mean, he's
why
in a
I think
position
that's
to.
why he's getting the treatment that he's getting.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy who and like I said, most big investigations need one guy like that.
Yeah.
They may have made overtures to Manafort. I mean, we just don't know.
I think
mean,
they did.
say that,
I
we
think they
don't.
did.
But
I think he told him to take a hike.
Yeah.
He's a lot older.
Well, and he did. And
he's
now
not older than Flynn, but Flynn's also, like you said, thinking about his son.
Well, and if you look at the charges that that Manafort is facing, he's facing, I don't know how many counts, 17 or 18.
Yeah.
And
Adios.
you stack the guidelines up on those, it's. I mean, he'd be spending the rest of his life in prison.
But we don't also know is this, and we all know this from experience, is that as cases go, as you said, that you start with the little fish. The government starts with the little fish, and they flip on the bigger fish, and it goes up until you get to Pablo Escobar, right? And so, in this case, Pablo Escobar is Donald Trump, maybe. Well, let's pretend for a second that Donald Trump is actually not guilty. Well, they could go and investigate, and finally get to the top here and be like, well, he didn't actually know.
Well,
Maybe-
we can't prove it.
Yeah, we can't prove it. And maybe the only
Yeah.
people we can prove it again, maybe Junior was involved, maybe Kushner was involved, maybe they weren't involved. Maybe it's just a coincidence that they lie about their involvement in meetings and things. Maybe they're just dumb.
But the problem with this, there's just so much. I mean, if anybody else was charged with a 1001 count, making a false statement to an FBI agent, they'd be about a level 20, probably,
Right.
no criminal history, and you'd be looking at 24, 36 months. You get if you pled guilty, you get your.
Do you think his past
well,
has something to do with it?
and the other stuff they're involved
He's a
in.
general.
Yeah.
You think? No, I'm serious. Do you
Well,
think
no,
the
no,
fact he's a general? I mean, you're talking about a general here who's, kind of went out on a bad way under the previous administration, but he was a 3-star general, and so this is not your usual snitch. This is not the snitch that we are used to cross-examining, who has a long history of criminal activity that's demonstrable, who admits it. On its face, when you just take Flynn before all this started.
But he's pled guilty to lying.
I understand.
And see, so you start with that. You start. I mean, as a criminal
I'm just saying
defense
is that
attorney,
that's
you don't have a
your
guy
first question.
Yeah, you don't have a
you
guy that's
pled
been,
guilty to lying.
you don't have a guy that's been breaking the law since
Are you a liar,
he's
sir?
16 years old. You have a guy that's been serving his nation ostensibly since he's
True.
18 or 20 years old. And so it may be part of it is because, well, look, rather than tearing this guy down for his extraordinarily stupid judgment and illegal conduct, and for the last 4 years or however long it was, 2 years, we're going to take into consideration his years of service to this country, and we're going to start there. It may have been a factor. I mean, he's not your typical snitch.
Not too long.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, JV.
Not too long ago, we heard that I think the judge recused himself, and I'm curious to see if you know why and how that'll affect the proceedings going forward.
Which judge?
The judge in Flynn, the Flynn's judge recused himself. It just happened. I don't know. Maybe a caller can call in and see and talk
Did it just
about
happen today?
3 hours ago or
Oh.
so.
Yeah, I hadn't.
Why would that happen? Why would now we have a federal
Maybe he
judge?
made a statement. Or
Well, because
maybe-
the interesting thing too is, the judge has to approve this.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because, I mean, so he's entered a guilty plea. And when they show up for sentencing, the judge still has to approve this deal because, she may say, or whoever the new judge is, I'm not going along with this.
I've
the
got to
plea's
say,
already been
I think
accepted.
that
But the plea agreement has not.
Oh.
They
gotta
reserve.
say.
They reserve it till the PSR comes out, and then.
Right.
they
So
still-
what we have is, but in 99.9% of the cases, by the time you get the sentencing, everything is approved, and they proceed to sentencing. The issue of whether or not they're going to accept the plea agreement at that point has already been pretty much done. I've never seen one not accepted at that point.
I've seen a couple.
I've seen it happen.
Have you?
Especially if it's
I've seen
if
it
it's a
happen.
C plea, which this
Yep.
is almost close to
Yeah,
a C
this
plea.
is like a C.
Yeah, but most cases are not C pleas.
Right.
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 What's a C plea?
Well,
It's an agreed plea.
Yeah,
it's like a
agree on
state
It's like a state court
It's very
plea.
specific.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
like instead of letting the guidelines be calculated out, it's where they say, okay, this guy should get 6 months or this guy should get 12 months in the deal. And usually you have to go and kind of grovel to the judge because what you're doing is you're taking away the federal district court judge's discretion. And you're saying, Judge, we between us have agreed on what the sentence should be, and your job here is just to impose the sentence that we've agreed on. And most federal judges appointed for life don't like anybody telling them what to do.
Most federal prosecutors are very hesitant to enter
Right.
into C pleas.
Right, and we don't see them very often here.
They're more common in other, I think, more common in other districts than here.
Right.
But it's a hard sell to get a C plea.
So the judge did recuse.
Did they say why?
Nope, not saying why.
Oh,
But
that's
they
a mystery.
will, yeah.
Well, one thing that they've tried to do,
doesn't have to say
you saw that
It's a he. It was the she is on Manafort's case.
Okay.
was it a couple of
Oh, yes.
I can't remember.
I know which one you're talking about.
isn't there an agent that was involved in the investigation that withdrew or was removed from the
Removed,
case
or-
because
or-
they're you got to give them credit. I think Mueller has done his best to keep his team clean.
I think he's trying.
I think he is trying. I mean, that's why they were removed. But you could go back to the point you made earlier about, well, maybe and some of the people he drafted, maybe.
Well, I was
he
going
did-
to say
yeah.
the people
No.
he drafted in the first place.
He drafted some hard-nosed dudes. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Untouchables, the movie, when they're putting together the team, and it's like, okay, we don't want the nice guys, we want the baddest.
Well,
dudes in the room.
it is interesting to see how this team has been constructed. I mean, they've got Michael Dreeben, who was the Assistant Solicitor General for a long time, very smart sort of legal lawyer,
Right.
law lawyer, and
To respond to the arguments like the president can't obstruct.
right,
justice.
exactly. I mean,
He's going to be the guy that
they got him
responds
to do that. They've got somebody that's an expert in money laundering.
Yeah.
You know, they've got Weissman, who's been at various different levels of DOJ and was the general counsel for the FBI, but is, typically, I think, thought of as a very sort of hard-nosed, tough prosecutor. So he really has put together a dream team of prosecutors here. You know, one thing that...
Know what you got on the defense side? Guys talking openly about stuff. I mean, the lawyer. What? Bring it up.
Yeah, we'll get to. let's take a phone call here real quick, and then we'll get on that. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hi, I was just curious. What are some reasons that a judge would be recused, and how does that work? How would you go about getting a judge recused?
Well, in this case, it looks like, and thanks for the call. In this case, what I'm looking at here online, it looks like the judge asked to be let off the case. Right. So that you can have a situation where a judge self-recuses, which could be for any reason. We don't know what it is. I mean, a judge might just want off the case.
I mean, normally it would be a conflict of interest.
Conflict of
It'd be
interest.
like maybe they know one of the parties.
Or they hold stock in a company that's before them. That's the major one.
They're supposed to recuse themselves and withdraw if they have some interest in the outcome of the case. Then it's not, then for the appearance, to avoid the appearance of impropriety, they're supposed to remove themselves. So what if it turns out the judge had a pre-existing social relationship with Mr. Flynn, with General Flynn? Right. Then it would look like an inside deal was being cut in his favor, and that the judge was going to approve it because they were social buddies, something like that. So especially on the heels of the agent being removed from the case, maybe somebody went and talked to the judge and said, Judge, we found out during the course of our investigation, Mr. Flynn, who we're talking to, has advised us that you two used to play golf every other Wednesday. Maybe you're not the right judge for this case. I mean, who knows? I suspect it's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I would think, especially in a high-profile case like this, I mean, any question, the judge is going to step aside.
Right.
You don't want the judge to become the issue.
That's right.
And we have the person who is at least a subject of interest in this case, whose first name is President, who, if he can find anything to distract from the investigation, he will. So Mueller's right to remove any question marks about the investigation itself.
Well, and frankly, they are. I mean, they are. I mean, and the Republicans are, raising issues about Hillary Clinton and So
Right.
There's
Well,
already
and
that.
They're
look,
going to
the
be
re-
doing that for another 300 years.
Well, and look, the reality is, whoever won this election, we were going to have a special counsel.
That's right.
Yeah.
No
whatever.
matter what. I mean, whether it's investigating the Russian collusion or if it's investigating the Clinton Foundation, it would have happened no matter what. We would have been talking about this same thing right now, whether if Hillary Clinton was in there. But I want to get back to what you said about the dream team of prosecutors and look at the other side of this thing, and look at what the defense has done. Trump's lawyers can't even agree on a defense.
Right.
And then we have this weird thing where one of his lawyers, John Dowd, goes out and you have this tweet that basically says we had to fire Flynn because we knew he lied to the FBI, which
New revelation.
Yeah, new revelation.
Never said that before.
And then it
kinda
takes on
slide
this
that
life.
in there.
And then it takes on this life of, well, Dowd actually drafted the tweet and sent it out.
This is what's surprising. I mean, Dowd is no rookie. I mean, he's a well-regarded federal criminal defense lawyer in D.C. I have to think that it all stems from having a client issue. I mean,
I think he has a client.
I mean, we've all
Client control
we've all had
issue.
client control issues, but can you imagine having Trump, not just the fact that he's the president, but just his personality as a client? I mean, no wonder his team is dysfunctional.
But and you see a lot of people out here, they're screaming, "That's it! It's an admission. He's guilty. Lock him up and send him away." Well, first off, no, it's not an admission, because even before Dowd came out and said what he did, I had a real question about whether or not you could even get this tweet in as evidence or in as some sort of admission, because any celebrity, okay, whether it's Trump, whether it is Taylor Swift, whether it's whoever, they all have media teams, and so they have all these people who are tweeting for them and running. I mean, look what happened with Ted Cruz and the porn site that came up when one of his staffers, his media team, retweeted the porn site. I mean, they have this team of staffers that does this. So I don't know how you would authenticate a tweet and attribute it to somebody as an actual statement that they made. I don't think you could.
Well, I agree you have issues there, but also in this case, the counter argument is you have a president who talks openly about his tweets. You have a president who talks about using tweets. You have a president who tweets all the time.
True.
And you have this whole history of him tweeting at 6 in the morning. We all, as a nation, wait to see what is going to be the next horrible thing that he says. Are we going to have World War III now? And so for suddenly his lawyer to say, I authored that tweet, and it's like, well, it's like what we were talking about a minute ago, which was, I mean, how often have any of us authored a tweet and told our client, tweet this? Yeah. Never.
Never.
None of us
The
ever.
first thing we always tell a client when they
Keep your
come in,
mouth shut.
get a good dose of shut
Yeah.
That's
and shut down all your accounts. Shut down Facebook. Shut down Twitter.
And David has brought up a good point, which is we got the hardest in the world to control client here with Donald Trump. You can't control him if you're the lawyer. You could try to just sort of manage him and keep them in the corral best you can. You know every day that there's going to be something, and it's amazing that the lawyers that he has have lasted this long without just going, screw it, I quit. I mean, but for a lawyer to say, I did that, I wrote that, or I authored that, or I told him to do that. It's just, and I understand he's highly regarded, but it's really weird.
But doesn't that make him a witness now?
No, that's exactly what I thought.
I mean,
and
not
doesn't
only
it-
that,
that's what I thought when I heard that. Is he's now inserted into the
witness.
case as a witness,
and may have potentially waived the attorney-client privilege.
and
a lot of
possibly
reasons
have
not for
conflicted
that to
himself
be-
out of representing them.
yeah.
But recall, this is an investigation.
Unless maybe he wants,
Well, that
Right.
he may want to.
But remember, we already had one lawyer who was compelled to testify
Right,
before
that's
the
right.
grand jury, where the judge
he won't be
said,
the last.
the attorney-client privilege here is waived and
Yeah.
it's being pierced, and you're going to testify.
Well, and now you've got a lawyer who's basically saying, I put out this statement using I issued this, whether he didn't actually do it, but I wrote it for Trump to write. I
or
mean,
his media team.
yeah, are they going to start saying that are they going to go back through his world of tweets and say, well, that one he said about the Muslims, somebody told him to do. I mean, it's there's only so much butt coverage he can get by blaming other people or having his lawyer fall on the sword. I think that's what it was. I think his lawyer was
I think
falling
that was
on the
exactly
sword for him,
what's
going on.
and nobody can ever claim otherwise.
No doubt. Let's jump on the phone lines here. We got another call coming in. Hello. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, I was watching the show, and I just had something just kind of occurred to me. Y'all are talking about the President of the United States of America, who's been in office for 1 year, and all you talk about
even.
are people. That's right, not even 1 year, elected just over a year ago, not even inaugurated 12 months ago, and all you're doing is talking about indictments and people who are staffers and former staffers, and then the other stuff you're talking about is Twitter. Is this just not striking anybody else as just completely ridiculous and surreal in a lot of ways, that this is the President of the United States of America, and this is what is really
Devolved.
to be talking about with them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great
good
point you make. I mean, it is surreal to be talking about the fact that we're having this kind of investigation.
Well, to highlight the point, go back 2 years in time in your own brain and think about 2 years ago what we were talking about on this show probably would have been the judge's systematic denial of PR bonds. You know I had to get that in.
Yeah, of
And
course.
In fact, they're still
You
fighting
cannot
that.
come on this show without getting that in.
The judges continue to fight that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. They spent $4.3 million of your dollars fighting that at the Fifth Circuit because they want to continue to abuse poor people. Okay, I got that. and they are doing it. But I mean, we would have been talking about, normal legal issues. And this man raises a great point, which is, look how far we have devolved, and I can't think of any other word for it. I mean, we are in this maelstrom of we don't know from day to day what the President of the United States is going to tweet. There seems to be no rules, no limitations. Political, and this whole argument of, what's politically correct is now like a catch-all phrase for doing the right thing. It's like acting with honor.
I want to respond a little bit to that point, because I think that what we're seeing is the resilience of our system.
That's a good point.
Because, we are, yes, the President of the United States is being investigated, as are many of his associates. But the process is playing out, and we can discuss this in the same terms that we would discuss any other
case.
And I think that shows the strength of our system.
That's a good one.
And so, yes, this is completely surreal. A lot of the events that we're hearing about and that we're talking about, but the system is the same system, and it's working in most cases. I agree that, I mean, the Flynn deal is unusual, but in most cases it is working exactly as the system has worked for.
Well, at least it's working as the system as we know it has traditionally worked,
right.
which is a system of coercing lower-end people to plead guilty and cooperate.
I mean, day to day, we don't like that, and we become Snitch Nation, and now Snitch Nation, where people are benefit for being snitches, and that's grown over the years in the federal system. Now we're seeing the ultimate, basically, in that it's playing out against the. It may actually. The real irony here is it's been I think, a destructive force in our nation, the fact that 5Ks and people have been encouraged to snitch on family members, on loved ones, and the federal government doesn't care who you snitch on, and Lord knows how many people have lied to get benefits.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately now we're at the point where the flip side of that is that all the bad that came from that, there may actually be the benefit out of it finally if it leads to the truth. I mean, I hope as lawyers, I know as the people at this table, but I think I hope that the goal, and I would hope that goal of every American would be to get to the truth. Obviously I don't like Donald Trump, but if Donald Trump didn't break a law, then Donald Trump should not be charged with breaking the law.
Yeah,
I believe in that. And so I want there to be integrity to this investigation. You can put politics aside, and in the end, whoever's the special counsel should put politics aside. And while 5K is a method to get somebody to talk, it should not be a method to get somebody to lie. And what we have to hope is, and I think there's faith, I have faith in this, that Mueller is a good enough law enforcement agent that he has the ability and the know-how to assemble enough information from independent sources to verify what is the truth versus what is a lie.
Well, and I think that might be part of the reason why why Flynn got such a good deal, because you're right, it's a cross-examiner's dream.
That'd be fun.
But I think the idea is that if it could lead to corroborating evidence, emails, texts.
there's
You know, who
gonna
knows?
be
That he may have even worn a wire for all we know.
He might have.
I mean,
you know,
if it leads
phone
to
calls.
that kind of corroborating information, then it doesn't matter if he can be cross-examined about the deal.
He
And
may
here's
know what the Russians. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but here's the thing. I mean, I don't know what's going on. We also don't know because recall the game has kind of changed a little bit in white collar too.
Yeah.
In terms of now you've got these guys wearing wires.
Yeah.
That never really used to happen. The other thing too is the Title III wiretaps. I mean, look what happened in New York on the securities fraud cases.
Well,
they started
and
getting
you know who was
Title III
involved in that case?
Yes.
John Dowd.
Exactly.
He was representing the target of the wiretaps.
Right. And
It's
so
going to be. We're going to think back. How many months ago was it that the President of the United States was alleging that Obama had wiretapping?
Right.
So there's this talk of wiretap is not new to this
Not
case.
new, exactly. I mean, there's all sorts of undertones. Of course, you know, and then the most absurd thing happened yesterday where Donald Trump Jr. is now claiming that in his testimony he tried to assert the attorney-client privilege on the basis that because there was a lawyer in the room with him and his dad, that somehow whatever was said in that room is now subject to the attorney-client privilege.
Well, he doesn't understand.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it's called your Fifth Amendment privilege. Is what you should have been putting,
exactly.
not the attorney-client
Right,
privilege.
I think you may be changing that answer.
Yeah.
Kind of pretending he went to law school there.
I had people texting me, literally asking, like, if there's an attorney in the room, is that really attorney-client privilege? No.
Explain why it's not.
No. I mean, there's no essence.
Well, it's not because there's no expectation of confidentiality.
And no expectation that there's a representation.
That there's a representation.
Right.
If you're having if you have
Even a prospective
if you
one.
meet with
Exactly.
if you meet with a prospective client, and then there's a third party in the room, then it's not a privileged conversation, unless they're both there. Seeking legal advice. But if I'm sitting there talking to a prospective client and there's somebody else present, it's not a privileged conversation. They've waived the privilege by that person being present. So what a lawyer does is, if they're interviewing somebody, let's say a young man comes in and he's under investigation and you want to get to the critical part, you ask the parents to step out of the room so that they don't become witnesses and so that part of the conversation is privileged. When you're setting the fee, you bring the parents back because that part is privileged.
But I mean, the way this whole thing sounds, it's almost as if the better analogy would be if you just walked into a room and two of your friends who are non-lawyers are sitting there having a conversation. You walk in, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, our whole thing was attorney-client privilege because Robb's a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's like no. It doesn't work that way.
But the question is Congress going to have the fortitude?
No.
Use a different word.
Whatever it is, the answer is no.
To compel the testimony.
This Congress doesn't have the fortitude to tie their own shoes. I mean, when we had the Watergate investigation, and I was in high school, and I hate to date myself, and I know that's going to surprise a lot of ladies out there because I know I'm very young looking. And okay.
You got about 30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. The point is that the Congress of the United States then, and it was a Republican Congress that took Richard Nixon and controlled that and investigated the Watergate case, and there were a lot of honorable men there. We don't have the same honorable men and women in the Congress anymore. We just don't. Now we are. It is all tribal.
It is.
And it's you can blame both parties. And you know what? What this country needs is for all these people that claim to be patriots need to stop claiming to be patriots, and they need to start acting like patriots and start caring about the country rather than their own political.
And on that
agenda.
note, I got to cut you off. We're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. That's all the time we have for 2017 with Reasonable Doubt. Guys, David Isaak, Robb Fickman, I appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks
It's been a great time.
Thanks for letting me get a word in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, right.
It was real difficult.
I got a few of them in there.
We had a
Well,
great time,
just
ladies and gentlemen. I'm
violent,
glad you could join us for the last episode this year. We will see you again in 2018. I hope you have a happy holiday and a happy new year. Julio, see you in 2018, my friend.
2018 and beyond.
All right, good night, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have for tonight.